Hey guys, I'm Lauren, and today you have the privilege of getting to hear me talk about one of my hyperfixations since I was like 13, the TV show Supernatural. The amount of information that I did not have to use sources on is embarrassing. Um, so today I'm going to be talking about queerbaiting, sexism, and the barrier gauge trope on the TV show Supernatural. So, just a very, very brief summary of this 15 season long show. You got Sam and Dean, they are monster hunters. Along the way, they meet Castiel, he's an angel who kind of like falls in with them. And Cass becomes a fan favorite and eventually becomes a recurring character and is shown to be very close with the brothers and is on their, like, their team, for lack of a better word. Throughout the show, Dean is shown to be heavily queer coded, and it's not just like implicit, it's like explicit a lot of times. Like they joke about him flirting with men, about having relations with men. Yeah, it's very implied, but then sometimes it's not, and then they make a joke out of it. There's also a lot of subtext regarding Dean and Cass and their relationship, because you have Dean and Sam and their emotional relationship, and then you have Dean and Cass, and their emotional relationship is one of the large supports of the show and really keeps people emotionally invested. However, the narrative just kept restating that they were just friends, like they're only interested in women, even though if it was a man and a woman, they probably would have been in a relationship at like season 6 or something. So basically these 2 episodes were, I think, very important to the discussion of the overall theme of what I'm talking about, and they have happened within the last year, so I thought it was relevant. So season 15, episode 18, Despair. Basically, Cass confesses his love for Dean, and then he's immediately killed off and dragged to hell. I'm not kidding. I'm not making that up. And then in the season finale, series finale, Dean dies. He's killed by falling on a nail. And in episodes 19 and 20, Cass's confession is never acknowledged. You never know how Dean reacted, really. You never know his thoughts on it. It's literally never talked about. It's like it never happened. Cass is mentioned once, I think. It's basically brushed under the rug. It's like, I love you, and then nothing else. So how this ties in to the psychology of women and gender. So queerbaiting is a relatively recent phenomenon where writers of like a show or a movie give hints that often like LGBT people pick up on. And so they are like, characters are implied to be queer to keep these audiences involved in the show. And you see it with Supernatural. They would tease fans about Dean and Cass to keep up ratings. Like when Cass would get killed off, ratings would die down, and then they would bring him back and ratings would go back up. So they know exactly what they're doing. And people have been calling us out for a really long time. However, it just continued to happen throughout the whole show. It would just keep being baited over and over again. There is also a lot of sexism on Supernatural. That could literally be an entire extension assignment in and of itself. For the most part, female characters on the show are one-dimensional, are either killed off or written off for no reason, often to further like male man pain and like angst. Women are often the ones being rescued. They really have no agency. Like they're just killed off to further men's stories, basically. And then if you have, as Supernatural does, all of the main cast is white men, right? So the bonds that are going to form are going to be between the men because they have no female characters, right? And so the writers kind of wrote themselves into a bind because they didn't have any female characters that could match up to Dean and Cass, but they couldn't explicitly say that they were like gay because they didn't want to give into that. I don't know. I'm not a writer. I don't know what they were thinking. But they basically wrote themselves into a bind because they didn't want to acknowledge Dean and Cass's subtextual relationship, but they also had no women to replace one or the other with. The barrier gaze trope is unfortunately another trope regarding LGBT characters that are often killed off in favor of furthering straight characters' storylines or like pain. Supernatural actually did this a couple seasons ago. They killed off Charlie, who was like a lesbian fan favorite character. She was killed off for no real reason. And Dean and Cass being killed off is just kind of a continuation of this trend, which is basically like gay people don't get their happy endings, and that's what this trend is. And there has been a lot of controversy about this. There are still many non-LGBT fans that watch the show that are like, they're just friends, like you're just reading in too deep to this show. There's also a lot of controversy about the actual like scenes and filming because things don't match up, and people are like, well, in some dubbed versions it was reciprocated and in English it wasn't. Like, what was happening behind the scenes? Did the network pull stuff to make it seem less romantic? And overall, it was just a hot mess because the show had just flip-flopped from a narrative that they had been pushing for years so quickly, and it didn't make sense. Like, and then they flip-flopped right back. And so everybody had whiplash, whether you wanted to or not. And this is just kind of the things that queerbaiting and sexism and the barrier gaze trope are saying. Like, gay people never get a happy ending. Heteronormativity is the norm. Gay people can be used as like bait, but they're never actually allowed to like be. They're never allowed to exist. They're just kind of there, but not really. And women are only integral to further men's storylines and have no storylines of their own. And then the legacy of the show and how it ties into real life. A lot of viewers were let down that did view these characters a certain way and like were very held them close. Like, a lot of women and LGBT people like genuinely did have a very strong connection to these characters, even though the writers would then make them kind of the butt of the jokes and stuff. And so fans were let down by the narrative, let down by the writers, and then the show in and of itself reproduced all these harmful societal stereotypes and standards. And so if you don't know like about queerbaiting or about the barrier gaze trope and you're watching this, those stereotypes and unconscious ideas that like gay people are unnatural and like they should be killed off and like that's okay to deal with gay people, and gay people don't get a happy ending, and women don't really have any agency. It just is perpetuating this cycle of abuse that women and members of the LGBT community experience, and I think that is shameful and very upsetting to me personally. Yeah, thank you for listening to me ramble about the show. I know way too much about it. I'm so sorry. And these are my sources.